Vlog 6. Minute to a minute and a half per movie. Gonna talk about some movies. Let's get into it. First movie that I watched was David Fincher's The Game, which I felt I was justified in having reasonable expectations for. It's David Fincher, one of my favorite directors. There's a Criterion Collection release of this movie, which is always a good sign. And I thought Sean Penn and Michael Douglas would lend well to a David Fincher project. I will say that I'm seeing some similarities between this movie and Fight Club. Some of the issues that critics had with Fight Club, I feel are more relevant to this movie, that is The Game, in that it's kind of style over substance, even a little stupid. But what Fight Club had that The Game unfortunately doesn't is, one, interesting, charismatic characters, and two, a sense of fantasy to it, a departure from reality that helps this bizarre story function. Now, The Game insists that it is real, that it takes place in our world, and that makes the concept very difficult to swallow. Throughout most of the movie, the film had a better justification for itself than I expected, so generally I was content, but the conclusion of The Game was one of the most underwhelming twists that I've ever experienced. But I sat myself back and digested the film a little bit and reminded myself that there were things that I really did enjoy and appreciate about this film. Kind of a dumb movie, but worth a watch if you're a Fincher fan and have already consumed most of his filmography. But this isn't one that I see myself revisiting anytime soon. Next movie I watched was cult classic Boondock Saints. The Boondock Saints. And this is a movie that a lot of people really, really like. And none of those people are critics. And that kind of makes sense after having watched it, because having basic understanding of how films should be made, as I'm watching this movie, almost shot to shot, scene to scene, and some scenes are better than others, but as I'm watching the movie, I can't help but think, you know what would have made this better? You know what would have made this work better? You know what you should have done here? And because it's not really a fundamentally well done movie, it's hard for me to enjoy it, but I certainly see the appeal in a superhero movie with two Irish hitmen that go and kill a bunch of people. I mean, there is definitely an audience for that. However, the two Boondock Saints kind of blend together into one character that even at the end of the film, there's really not much there, and all you know is they go to church and they kill people, which this might be blasphemy to some people, but I think that this movie would have been better if it had been the Boondock Saint, singular. And if they could have just combined the two characters with what little substance made up each of them into one character that could be better developed, that definitely would have improved the film for me. Willem Dafoe's character is definitely better, and I'm not going to say he's the deepest of characters, but the actor's clearly having a fun time with this one. He has some nice quips here and there, and he was a highlight for me. I didn't really enjoy this movie, but at the same time, I know people that I'd recommend it to. But the movie Moneyball is a movie I would recommend to pretty much anybody, because if you don't regard The Big Lebowski as a bowling movie, Moneyball is the best sports movie that I've ever seen. I'm not exactly a sports guy. I know how it works. I understand the appeal, just not my thing. And Moneyball is awesome in that it makes me care about baseball, even in its entirety. And it does this by crafting a universally appealing story and a down-on-his-luck guy going up against the odds. While this movie is definitely a sports movie, it's got those tropes, it's fundamentally well made enough and does its own thing enough to make this not just a good sports movie, but a good movie in its own right. What I really appreciated about this film is how every scene, every interaction between characters feels completely natural, absolutely genuine, and there's these little elements to each conversation that really make it pop and make you feel like the events of this film are actually impacting the lives of real people. Great movie all around. Not going to say it's perfect because there were elements like Brad Pitt's daughter that weren't entirely necessary. Little things here and there, but still a great movie. And even looking back at the year 2012, the movies that came out this year, this is one of the best that I've seen from that year. The Cinema Paradiso, I believe that's how you say it, will say it's a charming movie. There's a lot of enjoyment to be had with this one, and it made me feel good inside while I was watching it. It's pretty well done technically, and there's some passion behind it that's very apparent. This is a prime example of how movie lovers love movies about movies. And if you're not into that, I don't see this as a great film. I don't see this as a movie that should be held up as one of those movies that literally everyone can appreciate. I will say the ending montage is moving. Really great moments in the film and a great way to conclude the movie, but that doesn't excuse the rest of the movie from just being pretty good. And this is a good movie that is certainly worth a watch, but the 56th best movie of all time, I don't think so. Watched 3 Wilder movies. I'll just give you real quick here because if it's a Wilder movie that's worth talking about, I will be discussing it in a later video. So, watched Stalag 17, which is a comedy set in a German prisoner of war camp during World War II. And while that sounds like it'd be a really interesting project, the material and the genre do kind of clash. If you're a big fan of Christoph Waltz's character from Inglourious Basterds, there is a Nazi in this film that I believe to be like the first iteration of that character, and that was kind of fun. Wilder's Kiss Me Stupid was kind of stupid, and I understand how it was pushing boundaries when it was made. It was condemned by the Legion of Decency, the Catholic Church, but by today's standards, that novelty has really faded, and it leaves us with a movie that employs Wilder's style of comedy that I don't appreciate. The Major and the Minor, believed by some to be Wilder's directorial debut, even though there's another movie listed on IMDb before this one that I've yet to be able to track down. This movie reminds me a lot of Some Like It Hot in a lot of good ways. Ginger Rogers plays a very sharp, quick, funny character that's likable, and this isn't a movie that is intended to really impact you, but it's entirely enjoyable and honestly packs about everything I want in a comedy from the 40s. That's Log 6. Thanks for watching. Some good movies and some bad movies, but for now, I'm afraid this is